The emotions are high, right? The broker's excited because they're about to make a fat commission check. The seller's excited because they're a couple days away of getting rid of their asset and getting a large sum of money. I've been there. You've been there. You are willing to do things you would not normally do because the emotions are high. So I like when I hear that now for sure, because you can swoop in there and probably get a better deal.
Welcome to another episode of CRE Playbook Podcast. I am back with John Kleisch, who is now the proud owner of a commercial building. Last episode, we were talking to him and he was explaining why he got into commercial real estate to begin with and his path to get there. So if you haven't checked out that episode, please do. Very interesting story. But today, what we're going to talk about is what I assume most people who are watching this episode or listening to this episode care about, and it's how do you go find your first commercial building? What we want to do differently than a lot of podcasts is talk to people who are in the process of buying their first building, their second building, or they're getting started on this journey. And so you guys can understand how this process worked, why we bought the deal, why we liked it. And so that's what we're here to do today. So, John, let's talk about the first one that you have knocked down. And full disclosure, John has another one in the works that we will spend a whole another episode on. But this first one is a really, really good deal that John and I are doing together. So let's talk about it, how you found it, what you liked about it. Give us the deets.
Sweet. So, doing the standard John Heisler CRE Playbook approach going on there. I was using... Crexy is what I was using, cruising through there and just looking through deals. This one particularly caught my eye because it was right next door to a dealership that I worked at for 2.5 years. So that was like literally the main reason I clicked on it and saw it and said, hey, I know that building. I used to work right there. Let's see what's up with it. Called the broker, and this one was a little funny because, they have a couple brokers listed on there sometimes. So I was just going down the list and calling people. I talked to one of the guys who was on that list, and he pretty much blew me off. You could tell he was like busy doing something, right? He was like so not interested. And I was kind of like, dude, what the heck, man? And it was like a 3-minute conversation. Completely felt dismissed, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna call the other guy on here. Left messages for the other two brokers, and then the other guy called me back. I think it was like the next day. Preston called me and said, hey, appreciate your interest in this one. I can go over the details, but it is under contract now, and the buyer may get squirrely. They had a few days left on their inspection period, so I was like, shoot, when you hear that from the residential world, oh, it's under contract, pretty much you're like, done deal. I didn't write it off completely because I knew he said that there is a chance they might back out. So put a note in my calendar and said, hey, when is this inspect period up? I think it was like 5 days or something like that. I said, all right, cool. I'll follow up with you on Friday. So then I called him and on Friday, didn't get back to me. And then Monday he's like, hey, dude, the deal fell apart. Here are the more details on it. Here's kind of what we're looking at. And I got, took all my notes down, gave you a call right away. He said, John, this one's available. What do you want to do? And dude, if I remember correctly, we were under contract, I think on like Tuesday. There was not much back and forth. Yes. It was pretty much like, hey, these are the terms. They're willing to do seller finance. This is kind of where we want to be. And we made our offer. I forget exactly, but it was pretty dang close to what they wanted. I think we asked for a lower down payment. The price we did not mess with. We gave them their price, but the terms is what we negotiated on. I think they wanted, a 5-year seller finance term with like 20%, 15% down or something like that. And then we also negotiated our rate down lower as well. So that's kind of what we focused on was the terms, not so much the price, because the price we thought was reasonable. And you were a huge help on figuring out, what makes this deal a lot better. And the terms is what really, really made this deal really hum. The price, I feel like, was a pretty standard price. But the fact that we didn't have to go to a bank, put 25% down, get a 5-year term and everything like that, made that deal really sweet. And I think you'll have to remind me, it was like $1,500 a month cheaper by doing this or something
Yes.
than going through a bank, and way easier too, which was awesome because man, dealing with banks
Yeah.
is the worst.
So a ton of stuff to talk about in what you just said. I'm going to kind of start at the top. When you were talking about you called the first broker and he completely blew you off. I cannot tell you that is such a common story that I hear from folks that I'm working with and coaching to get these deals done. Do not get discouraged if you call brokers for deals and they just completely blow you off. There's a ton of reasons for that. We've talked about this before, I know, but it could be, maybe they had a bad day. Maybe their daughter lost a softball game last night, or they had a new baby. The baby kept them up the whole night before. Like, you never know. Or the more common scenario that we think of is, they're a super busy high level broker and you're some newbie calling them. And that is very, very true. But most of these deals have multiple brokers listed. And so sometimes you can start with the guy whose name is first, but I'll tell you a lot of times the guy whose name is first is the big name broker who's just attached to the property. And the broker that is second or third is the one actually with the relationship with the seller. And one, he's going to know way more about the property. And this is, one of the deals that he really needs to get paid. So he is absolutely going to take your phone call and follow up with you. So I like to actually start with the guy lower on the list and call him first. And if that doesn't work, go up the list. But yeah, if you're getting blown off by somebody, it doesn't mean the deal's bad. It doesn't mean the seller is not motivated. It means you just got to call the next guy for sure.
Yep, and also staying on top of it too. Like, these are leads, right? And like you said, a lot of times you call them, they're in a bad mood, whatever, they don't pick up 3, 4, 5 times of calling and everything like that. And then also that lets you know on their end that you're serious, right? If you're calling a guy 4 or 5 times, leaving 4 voicemails and text messages, that will let them know that, hey, you're serious.
Yeah. And then the other thing you talked about that I think is super important is, deals under contract fall through all the time. I think both of your deals were deals that fell out of contract that we picked up, if I remember correctly. And so if you hear a deal is under contract, ask them like John did when the due diligence period is going to be up. Mark that in your calendar in some way, shape, or form. And I would call them right before the due diligence period ends and then right after it ends. And just super simple, confirm that it's going to go through. And that's how you develop broker relationships through these. But I can't tell you how many times the deal falls through the contract or falls out of contract, and there is never a time where that seller is more motivated than when their contract is falling through.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say that. That's the worst, right? Because the emotions are high, right?
Mm-hmm.
The broker's excited because they're about to make a fat commission check. The seller's excited. They're a couple days away of getting rid of their asset and getting probably a large sum of money. And I know I've been there. You've been there, right? Like, you are willing to do things you would not normally do because emotions are high. So I like when I hear that now, for sure, because you can swoop in there and probably get a better deal.
Yeah. And John got the call from the broker on Monday that it fell out of contract, and we were under contract on Tuesday. So that goes to show you how motivated the seller was. And we'll get into the terms we got in more detail, but we got great terms. The other little analogy I always use with people that I wanted to talk about is what I love about commercial real estate a lot of times is when you're just talking to brokers about deals on market, there doesn't have to be urgency. So not every deal needs this extreme urgency. However, there is some period of time when you should have urgency. And this is one of those times. And so I give the analogy of, like, you've got a fish on the line. Like, if you're just fishing, you're just chilling with your and you can tell I don't fish all that much, but a couple times a year. But you've got your line in the water, you're just sitting there chilling, you may be slowly re-rolling it in, or you're just letting it sit out there, you're maybe drinking a beer, you're just relaxing, whatever's going on, and you're just chilling. So that's what discovery or talking to brokers should be on the front end. But when you get the ingredients of hey, I think I might have a deal here, then you need to move quick. And so John had that when this broker called him back and said, hey, this deal fell through. This guy is ready for a deal. Then act quick, which we did. We got him an offer, a written LOI, I believe, like the same day that he called us and told us that. So you got to get a feel for that. When you're close to a deal, act quick. Go re-underwrite it quickly, get an offer out. Don't put it farther down your to-do list. Put that up front and get it going. Let's talk about the terms. So you kind of went through some of them, but just to give everyone the details on this deal, I've got it in front of me, so I'm going to talk through some of the numbers. Give me one sec, pull it back up. Yeah. So this building is a little over 11,000 square feet. It's in Phoenix, Arizona. It was a $1.5 million purchase. It is zoned industrial. The use is auto body. So this is an auto body shop, or it was and still is at time of purchase. And the seller finance terms that we got. So we started pitching 10% down, which is typically where we start pitching stuff, which, full disclosure, is lower than most sellers and most brokers want you to be. They want you to be at minimum 20, but 30, 40. I've had a ton of brokers say, hey, he'll do 50% down. And, it gets really hard to make a deal work at those numbers. But we started at 10. I don't remember what interest rate we started at, but we ended at 5. Was it 5.25 or somewhere around there? 5% even?
Yeah.
5 even. So we got a 5% interest rate, and a little secret hack that's not really secret, but that we love to do is it's on a 30-year amortization. And we ended up, I think we negotiated back and forth. We ended up at 15% down. And then in the due diligence period, we found some stuff which we can get into. And then I think we finally closed at 13% down, which is awesome. So less money out of our pocket for the down payment, which we'll talk about we used for the rehab budget. But 5% interest, the reason I use that number a ton is it's close enough to current interest rates that sellers are willing to do it. If you're throwing out, I have bought properties on 0%, and it'll happen in the right circumstance, but I don't expect it every time. And so I want to give the seller a reasonable interest rate if it works for us on the monthly payment, but there's no reason it has to be necessarily market rates. At the time that we bought this, market rates were anywhere from 6.5% to 7%. So we saved a couple points there. But the real kicker is most commercial loans are 20 to 25 year amortization periods. We just automatically push for 30 all the time. And sellers don't balk at 30 because they're used to it from the residential space. So you can get 30 very, very easily. However, you want to talk about the balloon a little bit. So they do care about when they're done with the loan, for sure.
Yeah, that was a big point too. They, with commercial loans, everyone wants like a 5-year balloon is pretty standard, meaning, hey, you got 5 years and then you got to re-up and get a new loan, or in this case, probably refinance out of it. And we knew that to make this deal even better, pushing out that balloon is really, really important for a lot of reasons, right? Like it lengthens the horizon of the time frame. In that time frame, in 5 years, who knows, right? Rates can go up, they could go way down. And then when you have 8 years, say there was a nasty spike in rates, and then that happens in year 4, we're fine, right? We can hold that out and wait 4 more years. Whereas if that happens and the rates go up and we have to refi right then and there, again, like that could cost you an extra $1,500, $2,000 a month. And in this case too, say if rates go down below 5% in year 4 or 5, maybe we refinance then as well. So it really opens up a lot. It makes me feel a lot more comfortable because of that interest rate risk is, I'm still pretty new, but you'll have to expand on this. Like that's a very risky position to be in commercial. I know, perfect timing, right? Brandon Turner just got freaking not wiped out, but hosed. I think $15 million he lost exactly because of that. The asset did really good. He increased rents. He increased the tenants. I think he's at 95% occupancy, and he still lost $50 million just because of that interest rate. So to expand that balloon made me, I'm sure you felt a lot better, but I felt really comfortable doing an 8-year balloon on that. Would have liked more, but 8 years, that's plenty of time.
Yeah. And everything you said is true. The sellers, when you get a seller who's interested in seller finance, they always want to throw out short balloons. Well, I see two things. When you talk about you want a 30-year amortization schedule, they're like, oh, I don't want to be married to you for 30 years. I'm like, well, don't worry. That's just the amortization schedule. We can put a balloon on there. And I am typically shooting for 10 to 12 years. But the sellers typically are shooting for less than they want 5 years or less. A lot of times they'll throw out 2 or 3 years, which you can imagine 2 or 3 years is really, really short in commercial. You're not going to sell, you're not going to stabilize and sell a building in 2 or 3 years unless it's already pretty dang close to stabilized. Ironically, this building actually could be one where that's possible. But you want as much time as you can get. And so I never do shorter than 5. And even in 5, it's got to be a special circumstance to do 5. So I really start 10, 12, and a lot of times we end up landing around this 7, 8 year time frame like we did on this deal. And that's perfectly fine. It gives you enough time to stabilize, and then you can decide, do you want to refinance? Do you want to sell this thing? And figure out what you want to do.
Yep.
So why did you like this deal? What attracted you to it? I know you said the dealership was next door. What else was it?
Yeah, so outside of that, right, that was like, I'm not buying a freaking $1.5 million building just because I worked next door to it 5 years ago, right? That was like the hook. And then once we, because it was utilized as a single tenant space at the time, and we saw it as there's 2 suites here for sure. And then we were walking around it, seeing all the outdoor bays and the storage areas and everything like that. So we knew that there was a lot more potential to increase the rent roll on there, getting multiple tenants in, and effectively they were getting, I think it was $7,500 a month is what they were bringing in. And we knew right off the clip that, hey, market, if we rented it just as 2 spots, was going to bring about 14 or something like that, maybe a little bit less is what we saw. So getting in there, breaking up those spaces, making it easier to lease, because instead of finding one tenant that wants to pay 14 grand, much easier to find, 3 tenants that are going to pay 5 grand each. So we saw that the huge potential for other areas to rent out. The area is awesome. It's right next to 2 dealerships that are worth $150 million each. And especially that this building is catered towards automotive because it has that paint booth and the big doors and everything like that. It just made a lot of sense. Like it looked to us like this was the perfect value add that we can go out and do. Push those rents, break up the spot, and it wasn't like we needed to do work. These spaces were already there. Like we didn't change much. We didn't change anything really outside of like some needs a new roof and things like that. But we didn't change like the footprint or do anything on that. So it was easy to increase those rents and get more tenants in there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a perfect example of the kinds of deals that we like to do, and what, if you're listening to this and you're trying to get into space, what I think you should look out for as well. So yeah, like John mentioned, when he walked it the first time, and we're seeing one tenant taking up the entire 11,000 plus square foot, and I believe in the second space, he was really mostly using that as storage, if I remember right. And
there's one car in the tenant 2 spot.
Yeah.
And it was the guy's personal car that he was like just working on.
Yeah. So immediately we knew like, we can rent this second spot, and we had a feeling we could also rent the outdoor spots for bays and different things like that. But, that was only a, educated guess at that time. And, but yeah, so then we put under contract, and then talk about kind of what we did from there as far as, proving that thesis was true.
Yeah. So the best part about these longer due diligence periods, I forget exactly how long it was. I think it was 60-day due diligence.
It was 60 days. Yeah.
So 60, then 90-day close. So, 60 days at first, because we didn't walk this property prior to getting it under contract. We saw it after we did, right? We looked at it Google Maps and talked to the broker and got a really good idea, and obviously liked the numbers. And then for starters, walked the place, right? Checked out the structure itself. hey, is this a viable structure? What's going on? We knew it needed a lot of work, checked all that stuff out. Everything was like, okay, hey, we knew what we're getting into. It and definitely needs some work to get spruced up. So that was like number one. Hey, is this building completely junk? Is it going to need a ton of work? And it was pretty much exactly what we thought it was going to be on that side of things. So that was a huge plus. And then next was, all right, let's get this thing on the market. Let's get some ads out and go find some tenants. In this case, there was an existing tenant who was interested in staying, and he just he's been there 15 years. He was paying half of what market rent was, and we thought that maybe we could get him to re-sign a lease on his portion. And he was a little bit troubled there. But the main thing is, hey, let's get this thing out and see what we can actually get. Because if you can get leases signed during your due diligence period, that's like the best. That's like supercharging everything, right? Because it could take you 6 months or even a year to find a tenant, and you're still paying those expenses. You're still paying your mortgage, your taxes, insurance. If it's vacant, you're paying utilities and everything like that. So that could add up, and that really made this deal like awesome. If you could get people signed up there, and newsflash, we did, right? We found 2 tenants to come in, and we got them signed up. It was for sure before our due diligence.
It was.
Right? Yeah. So we got those 2 tenants lined up, and those leases were for like $12,000, I think, basically 12.
Yeah, like 12.
So walking into a deal with tenants that are going to move in literally the day that we closed was huge, right? That way you don't need more capital. It de-risks it. And when you're talking to capital investors, you're not having a building that is vacant and they're going to have carrying costs. You're walking into a deal that is automatically producing cash flow. So that is like the coolest thing that you can do during due diligence period for sure. And at least maybe if you don't get an actual tenant signed up, at least you have market feedback, right? Like maybe you have 2 months to go lease it and you get squat, right? Then it's like, well, that's not good. Or not even squat. Maybe you do get a lot of interested people, but it doesn't work out. What I really learned a lot from these prospective tenants was what people are looking for, right? Like, oh, I don't want this. I don't want this. I want this instead. This is what I'm looking for. Oh, this doesn't work because of this, right? Like door height. I learned about like turning corners with semis and things like that. And so if you're having like you're like not a storage company, but you have like construction and you have big trucks and trailers. Well, if you can't back up those trailers and do that easily, that's going to be a problem. If your trucks are too tall, they're not going to fit in the bay. So you learn a lot on what the market is asking for. And what I learned too is that a lot of times you find people that have a complaint about XYZ. Oh, I don't like that. This part is in the back of the building. That might be a bad thing, but I've had a lot of people that came through and said, oh, I love that it's in the back. This is perfect for what I need to do. So it's a really good market research tool to get you in tune with what people are looking for, what they want, what they don't want, and what they do want and what they don't want. So that was like the best due diligence you can do is like, go ahead and lease that space. You're just going to learn a ton about that building and the market.
Yeah. No, I think that it's a great point, and it's when you obviously have to have permission from the seller and broker to be able to list something for lease that you don't own yet. But when I find, unless there's a particularly difficult seller, which we've definitely had, another deal that we did this past year with a different student, I'm going to make an episode on, and the seller absolutely would not let us do this process that John did. But when they allow you, it puts you just so far ahead of the game because you do get the market research. You get a feel for, is this going to get 0 leads for the 2 months that we had it listed? Or is the phone going to ring off the hook? And the good news was John's phone ringed off the hook with people interested in the space. Now, did it work for every person that wanted to go look at it? Absolutely not, for all the reasons John just said. But you're going to get that in industrial retail and office with these business tenants. They're looking for very specific things for their unique business that you may or may not have. And that's okay. Like, you can never plan for all the different variables. As you start doing this more, you start thinking about things like, If my tenants have big trucks, can they fit it? Is there enough parking? Is it safe? What's the security like? Yeah, what's the door height? What's the ceiling height? What's the loading situation? What's the electrical capacity of the building? And so you can start thinking through all those things as you're looking at a building. But the reality is, until you start testing the leasing market, you're never going to 100% know what people are looking for. And the beautiful thing about this building is we were able to market it to folks looking for inside space of various different sizes, because we could break it up in different size amounts. But then we also could market it to smaller auto guys that are looking for just a single bay, and they were okay being outdoors and different things like that. So it gave us a ton of flexibility, and we were able to market those different spaces and get feedback from different kinds of tenants about what they were looking for. So we knew that this was, even if we hadn't signed those contracts before due diligence ended, the fact that John's phone was ringing all the time and he was having quality conversations with tenants, we knew that this building would lease up. The other thing to talk about is, like, when you're doing these style of deals, far and away your biggest risk point is if you can get tenants in the space at market rent or not. Like, that is the main question. That is perhaps the only question, really. If you're doing development or multifamily or storage, like, there's a lot more risk points and variables, especially development. If you think about all the risk points there, it's zoning, it's utilities, it's leveling the space, it's clearing it, it's getting all the permits, it's going ground up, and then does the market want what you're building, and at what price point is like the last main barrier. But because we're doing these buildings that already exist, yeah, we may fix up some things here or there, but we're really buying buildings that are under rented or under occupied, or buildings like this where we can just add more tenants and increase the revenue. And so really our main thesis is, can we rent this building at the rate that we think we can get in the different spaces? And so it's awesome if you can prove that before you've even bought the building. You've essentially eliminated your main risk point. So it's awesome.
Yep. Yeah. It was just so great getting all this different feedback from tenants or potential tenants, because they know things that you don't.
Yeah. So let's talk about the work that the property needed. So that was something that, we spent a lot of time figuring out in the due diligence period. And don't get us wrong, like, yeah, we could lease it right off the beginning. And we had it marketed for lease almost as soon as we went under contract. But the building definitely needed work. So let's talk about what we thought it needed, how we figured out what the price of that was, and all that.
Yeah. So definitely this building, I wouldn't say dilapidated. It was just neglected, right? The dude bought it cash, had it for 15 years, had one tenant in there. And I would assume that he's probably never, ever been to the building, just by the way that it looked. Didn't put a dollar into it. That I'm sure of. So the big thing was the roof, right? 11,200 square foot roof was expensive. That was definitely the biggest factor. We got 4 or 5 quotes ranging from 83 grand all the way up to about 100, and I think 143,000 was the biggest one. So we got a bunch of different quotes on that. The swamp coolers, which are like evaporative coolers, I know that's not really used in a lot of the parts of the country. I don't think you even knew what those were, right? Being in Georgia. So long story short, they only work in dry, hot areas, Phoenix, the Southwest, things like that. So those were all shot, like completely shot. I think there was 6 of them total that were busted. And then what we found, there was an AC issue as well, which actually the seller fixed during due diligence. He put a new compressor on that. So that was nice. The other unit had a couple busted AC units, which are now expensive. They're like 12, 15 grand each. And then the other thing that we found out during due diligence was that front block wall. And the front block wall had some issues with like stucco, water getting in there, and a big old crack. And that was the main reason we were able to renegotiate our down payment, which saved, I think, 40 grand or something like that we needed to bring to the table. So we were looking at $200,000 worth of getting this building back up to snuff, getting it solidified and protected, and just getting it back up to an operating space.
Yeah. So yeah, about 200 grand on a building that was worth 1.5 million. A couple key points there. Far and away, the number one thing to check on all these buildings is the roof. I don't even make offers without looking at the roof on Google Maps and kind of getting some clarity of what it looks like to begin with. And then we bring drones out there. We bring roofers out there to get, and like John said, multiple roofers every single time in the due diligence period. We absolutely do not wait until we own the building. You have to get a good understanding of what's going on with the roof. And even if the roof looks amazing in photos, I'm getting a roofer out there to evaluate it in the contract period. It's just too big of a price tag for these size buildings. If you're buying a building in the $1 to $2 million range, a roof is about 10% of your total purchase price, maybe up to 20%. And so you better have a good handle on how good a shape it's in. And it's a heavy negotiating point you can bring to the seller if they claim it's in good shape or decent shape and you find out it's not. That's a great negotiating point if you need it. So yeah, definitely that. And then obviously the big stuff below that is HVACs, like John talked about, and then in Phoenix, swamp coolers, which I had no clue absolutely at all what that was. Being in Georgia, we're trying to keep the humidity away, not adding humidity to the environment. So that was different. And then yeah, foundational, stucco, all those kinds of things you definitely want to check through, which we did and discovered that issue. Those issues shouldn't scare you away either. Every issue has a price tag. You just have to feel really good about what that price tag is going to be before you close. And in the commercial space, especially for big ticket items, get 3+ quotes, maybe 5+ quotes on these big jobs, because you're going to see numbers all over the place. Like John said, we had roof quotes of 80 grand up to 150. I mean, that's a 70K swing. And you don't know, maybe the 150 is the right one. You don't know until you start getting in there and asking what their quote is and what quality of job they're actually going to do. But yeah, get a ton of quotes on every big ticket item for sure.
Yeah, I like 5, dude. Like, because 3, you just never know, right? You could run into 3 guys that are either they're really expensive and they offer a wonderful product, or they're on the other end where they're just really cheap and they have no idea what they're doing and they're drunk and they're going to screw everything up. So that's why I like that, especially on big stuff like that. Maybe not so much on little things here and there, but dude, like you said, 7 grand different. That's a lot. It's almost double.
That's a lot. We're going to get into funding it next, but before we do, let's talk about just the basic yearly expenses on this building. So when you're underwriting these buildings, we already talked about the revenue. So the previous seller was getting $7,500 a month, and we knew right away the low end we could get probably 12 grand for the inside and potentially a little bit more, and then we could start selling outside spaces and bays as well. And you want to do this on a spectrum. You don't want to just assume you're going to go make 18 grand a month in this situation and underwrite for that. So we underwrote on the low end for it to be 12 grand. And then on the high end, I think like maybe 16, 17 grand, and in the middle in that 13, 14 grand range. So you want to kind of do this range, but that's kind of where the revenue shook out to be. So where are the expenses shaken out to be on this building?
So taxes are a big one. Taxes on this building are about 15 grand a year. And then the insurance was a big to-do, right? Because at first we talked to our insurance guy and he was shooting numbers like, oh, this won't be too bad, right? It'll be like 8 grand, 7 grand, something like that. And then we were like, all right, cool. And then we got closer into that and he started getting quotes and they were coming back at like 15 grand, 13 grand. And one even came at 17 grand. And we're like, well, that sucks. That's extra $1,000 a month that we weren't expecting to spend. And then he got to work and started a friend. So it was really nice that we trusted him and he put a lot of effort into it and really hit a lot of the different brokers or whatever they do on the insurance side of things. And we got that insurance under 6 grand, I think, $5,800 or something. So that was like a big victory because we were like not sweating it, but it was like, man, that's a tough pill to swallow. So that insurance is called $6,000 a month. And then, our mortgage on this one, that's 72.45, so $7,245. And then the leases that we signed were not triple net, but they were very favorable for us as far as maintenance goes. We were just covering the roof and the exterior. So as far as the other expenses on there, we were able to pass those off to the tenants. And then another thing that we didn't touch on is that we did give those guys a better deal on the lease because they were willing to sign it. So we did kind of under lease it a little bit just to get that locked in to really solidify that deal. We definitely could have gotten $1,000 or $1,500 extra, but at that point in time, it was pretty clear that we were willing to work out a deal and get these guys in the door.
Yeah. So a bunch of stuff to talk about there. So taxes, which you said we're at 15 grand. You want to check taxes in the due diligence period or before. And the next thing you want to do is you want to look at the valuation of the building at its current tax rate. And a lot of times if these buildings were bought a long time ago, like this one is no exception, the valuation of the building, it could be up to modern day, which this one was pretty close. I believe it was like 1.2, 1.3 is what they had it valued at. But I've seen a lot of these buildings where the seller bought it 20 years ago for 200 grand and it's worth $2 million now. And the valuation is like 500, 600 grand. And in that situation, if you go buy it for double or triple what the valuation of the building is, you need to be prepared for at some point, maybe not right away, but at some point your taxes are going to double. So underwrite for that tax increase. And AI is really good at helping with this now. I used to do all this by hand and calculate the millage rate, but you can do this with AI. But just make sure you add in that tax increase, because it's a newbie miss sometimes when you just assume the taxes are going to stay the same. They absolutely will not. The other thing you talked about, insurance. Yes, I remember talking to that broker and some other brokers, and something that we learned through this process is, insurance companies don't necessarily love auto body shops and all things cars. They're just, and I didn't realize this till we got into this deal, they're a little bit more of a fire risk. You've got tires and other things like that can burn heavy. You just have a potentially to them riskier fire risk style building. Plus, from the liability piece, you've got folks working with heavy machinery and they're at risk of hurting themselves and suing you for that. So between those two things, insurance can be higher on these buildings. And you want to make sure, in this situation, we got, I don't want to say lucky, but we got a quote closer to what we actually wanted to see and what we underwrote for. So you're going to underwrite at an insurance quote, but then you absolutely need to talk to your insurance agent, broker, whoever, in the due diligence period. You don't need to wait. A lot of people forget insurance until like 5 days before they close. I did that in residential all the time. And we'd be like, oh, we're closing tomorrow. I need to call my insurance guy and get it covered real quick. Don't do that in commercial, because the quotes can vary widely, and you need to make sure that you've underwritten the right amount of money for whatever your insurance cost is going to be, because that can absolutely kill your cash flow if you're not prepared for it.
And for the insurance too, those insurance companies, they wanted it all up front. So they wanted a $17,000 check stroked for the year. Without doing payments and everything. The one that we ended up getting was, hey, you just pay monthly and you're good. So that's, like you said, like that would have really sucked, having to stroke a $17,000 check versus $500 a month. Like, you tell me what you want to do.
And the lender, we got a seller finance deal on this, so the seller, doesn't care. But most lenders are going to make you cut the first year insurance check at close. So be prepared for that money to be included in the amount of money you got to raise or bring yourself to get these deals done, for sure. So talking about the general expenses, like you said, so what else should you prepare for when you're going to look at a building like this? So we talked about taxes, insurance. What about landscaping, repairs and maintenance, utilities, employees, property management, any other expenses that you remember budgeting for this thing when we were looking at it?
Ooh, let's see here. for property management, I was just going to handle that. So I forget if we put that in there or not. I don't remember. I'm not sure, but my plan was to do that from the get. Other expenses, just, okay, hey, knowing that there are some older AC units on there, if we are going to be responsible for those, marketing, if you're going to be paying for any kind of marketing, or budgeting, if you are going to hire a broker to lease the spaces, they need to get a check as well. Those all vary on different, terms and everything like that. So that's another big expense that a lot of people probably don't think, that if you have a broker getting you a lease that's at $7,000 a month, that's 84 grand a year, and it's a 5-year lease, that's a $400,000 lease. They're going to get a good chunk of that, which I think is like, what, 5% or something like that?
Yeah, it
Is
can
what they
range
typically want. Or
somewhere. Yeah,
so,
4, 3, 4, sometimes 2. Yeah.
yeah. So that's a lot of money right there, especially when you're talking about these bigger leases as well. And then for this one specifically, this is mostly concrete, right? There's no plants, there's no garbage or anything like that. We don't have snow out here, so we don't have to pay for any of that. So there, for this one was pretty straightforward. There wasn't much else as far as other things that we were doing maintenance wise and other costs on it. It was pretty
Yeah.
cut and dry.
Yeah. So industrial can range from, a kind of, in this world, we call it a full service or gross or modified gross lease, all the way to triple net. And a lot of times I find in these industrial deals, especially the multi-tenant industrial deals that we're looking at, these sellers that we're talking to that are more mom and pop, not REIT level institutional sellers, there's a wide range of what you're going to find. Sometimes the landlord's paying everything and the tenant's paying nothing. Sometimes they're what I would call a true triple net, where the tenant isn't reimbursing the landlord for the taxes, insurance, repairs, and maintenance, and all those things. But you're going to see a wide range of everything in between. And what we like to do is, and we're okay with that, we'll buy it gross, full service, whatever, and then hope slowly over time that we can convert it closer and closer to true triple net. Now, so far with this building and just the way tenant negotiations have gone, and so it gives us a ton of flexibility. And so we were able to get a higher amount of money monthly from the tenant, but the tenants are currently not reimbursing us for taxes, insurance. So we're in what we would call a modified gross lease. Because we decided we would go the more multi-tenant route and have multiple tenants in the building and then multiple tenants outside the building, it was just easier if we kind of handled that and increased the rents appropriately so to handle that cost. Now, utilities, the tenants are splitting amongst themselves. And like John said, the big thing I love about industrial, it's not like owning multifamily or single family. If the toilet breaks, we're not fixing it. If whatever else happens, like John said, it's a pretty concrete and basic floor building. There's not a stove and a fridge, or if there is, the tenants bought them and they're theirs. There's not a stove, but there may be a fridge in the break room. There's just not a whole lot of stuff that can break that's ours. But even if it did, the repairs and maintenance is 100% on the tenant, with the exception of the roof and exterior structures. And sometimes what you got to look in these leases as you're evaluating these deals is the HVAC sometimes can be yours as the landlord, sometimes can be the tenant's. And so you got to figure that out in the lease. But in general, on this one, we're just roof and exterior structures. So you don't really, some people would budget 0 for repairs and maintenance. I think you should budget a little bit of money, somewhere in the 10 to 25 grand range, depends on the size of the building and what you fixed or haven't fixed. Because we just fixed a bunch of stuff, we just did a whole new roof and we're fixing the exterior block issue. Theoretically, we should be good for a long period of time. So we don't have to hold as much money for stuff breaking that we are responsible for on this building. But if we weren't going to replace the roof, you might want to hold more money back, knowing you're going to have to potentially replace the roof, 10 years from now, 12 years from now, whatever it is. So that is revenue and expenses. Let's talk about how we funded this thing.
Cool. So yeah, simple. We funded it, and it worked out that way because we negotiated a much lower down payment to begin with, and then during due diligence, we retraded not the price but our down payment because we found some more stuff that needed to get done, and then like I said, I think we got like $47,000 off of our down payment or something close to that. So it was a lot
Yep.
easier for us to stomach that because we didn't need to come up with what was it, 200 and something grand or whatever. So we were looking for people,
Yeah.
would have brought on people for sure for capital partners, but it just didn't work out, and it was so easy. I shouldn't say so easy, but it was a much smaller lift to go out and just fund it ourselves, and it kept it easier, especially in the beginning. My first building, right? One less thing to worry about having another capital partner on there. So for this one was great to have a reasonable down payment that me and you could come to the table and just stroke a check and get rocking and rolling from day one, especially with it cash flowing too. From the day one, getting money in the door made that a lot more palatable for us to fund it ourselves.
Yeah. And basically the process, what we do on these deals is, once you've figured out what you think the revenue and expenses are going to be, what your NOI, net operating income, is going to be, you have a rough idea of what your debt service is, then you can get a much better idea of how the building is going to cash flow. And once you understand your scope of work, and you know what your down payment is, and you understand your closing costs, you can understand how much money has to be brought to the table by somebody, whether that's the general partners, or in this case, John and I, or am I going to bring on capital partners in a limited partner role who are going to bring cash? We manage the building, and you can do a little bit of both. You can do mostly capital from somebody else. You can do capital from yourself. And so what we like to do is completely understand all the financials about the building, and then we just put it on a spreadsheet and we look at what makes the most sense for each project. Also, in what scenario we are in with how much cash we have available to put in deals. And yes, because the down payment got reduced on this deal for the amount of work that it needed, it made sense to us at the time to go ahead and buy it with our own capital, because we were looking at that cash flow, and having that cash flow come directly to us was very attractive. And so that's why we decided to do it in that situation. If we needed to bring more capital down, I think even if the down payment had stayed the original 200 grand, knowing the amount of work that the building needed, we would have brought a capital partner on at the time of purchase. The other thing with this being a seller finance note, typically on generating a loan, you're going to pay expensive loan origination fees a lot of times, and we didn't have any of that. So our closing costs were very minimal. It was whatever the title company had, title insurance, and there's a lot of stuff that lenders need that aren't even fees that we didn't have to pay. So that whole first year of insurance, we got to pay that monthly instead of in one big cut. A lot of times they want to escrow another year of whatever other fees on the background. I just did a couple closings where that was required. So I paid the whole year of insurance, and then they wanted to escrow like another period of insurance on top of that. They wanted to escrow a couple months payments on top of that I don't get to touch. And all that's fine. I understand that's how it works. But we didn't have to do any of that because of the seller finance on this deal. So just our closing costs were way less too. For the audio listeners, we'll throw up some photos. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can get a sense of what this building looks like. And John said it a little bit, but just wanted to reiterate, this is a $1.5 million building that was just under 12,000 square feet. So, I would call it mid to smaller building, but it's not too small. This is not a pretty beautiful building. I mean, this is an auto body shop, and it's not bad. Like John said, it's not falling apart. It's not dilapidated. It had some things we had to fix, but this is not, if you come from the residential space and you're looking at nice modern flips with beautiful white kitchen and walk-in shower and all that, this is an industrial auto body shop. It's not that. It doesn't have to be. The tenants don't want that. Like John said, they're looking at it from its functionability, usefulness for their business. They don't care that the floor and the walls aren't freshly painted. You can certainly do that and increase the value if you want, but we didn't feel the need to do it at close. We may do it before we sell it to some degree, but if we sell it, I'd love to hold this thing forever. Cash flow is so great. But that's what I love about these buildings. They don't have to be perfect. They have to be useful and functional and last. So they have to have a good roof. The things need to work, but that's it.
Yeah, I remember after I walked it, Preston, the broker, was like, "So, John, what do you think?" And this was my like, I think this was the first commercial building I've walked like ever. I'm pretty sure, outside of visiting commercial buildings for whatever, buying stuff or car, whatever. And I was like, "Well, I liked it a lot more before I saw it." But
It's
now,
true.
like you said, being coming from the residential world, you're totally spot on, right? Like this building was gross. It's just it's not an attractive thing, right? Like if you take a picture of it and you show that to somebody, like my mom would be like, "Ew, you bought this for 1.5 mil?" Like it is not to go on any cover of any magazine. That's for dang sure.
Yeah. Now they're attractive to me in a different way, but yeah, when you first look at them, they're not attractive buildings. They're either big metal buildings or big concrete buildings. They got basic concrete floors. Like there's just not a lot going on. But now I love that because there's just not a lot that can break. It's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean that took me a while. You were mentioning that to me quite a bit about like, John, we don't need to do that. We don't need to do that. We don't need to paint. We don't need to do anything like and now that is like ingrained into me. Now, before coming from the house world, I always wanted to do like you got to put out the best product, right? And now it was a very big mindset shift to change that because I do like having nice stuff, right? Like I keep my cars really clean, I keep my house looking nice. But then this building, it's like walking around, there's a piece of trash, and I just freaking kick it out of the way, like. But then
Awesome.
also, it's
So
not like you gotta like you mentioned, you gotta like fix the roof and have it a nice place to work. You can't like neglect these buildings. But we're talking about like aesthetically pleasing
yeah,
type stuff.
yeah, cosmetics they don't need, but they need to work and be functional and last. That's the key. Oh, one other thing, you're talking about the property management piece. I forgot to touch on that. So you can absolutely hire property management on these buildings if you like. In my experience, until you hit a certain number of tenants, it's not necessary. The heavy lift is up front in getting them leased out. And especially if you get people on a multi-year lease, is like once you have it leased up, there's just not a whole lot of things that they're going to need. I mean, remember, they're not calling you to fix anything. And as long as the bills are being paid and they're paying their rent on time, you want them to have, they even write this in the lease. They call it quiet enjoyment of the building. Like you want them to be able to run and operate their business. And that's what they want to do. And it's nice and easy once these buildings are set up. Now, it doesn't mean you shouldn't necessarily underwrite for management in your numbers. You may go ahead and underwrite it because then if you want to replace yourself or if you want to add a management person into your small company, you can do that at a later date and you have money to pay that person. But yeah, you don't necessarily need property management right out the gate on these buildings.
Yeah, and especially the way we structured them with the modified gross lease too. That makes it a lot easier, right? Like the only time I'm getting calls is if there's like, I wouldn't say a major problem, but oh, hey, this tenant keeps on leaving this car here and blocking me in. Can you tell? Okay, no problem. Cool. Or I mean, I'm trying to think of what other reasons people hit me up. Oh, hey, I can't pay my bill online. Can you help me? And then stuff like that. It's not, hey, I'm not getting calls for, hey, can you do this? And I got to send a maintenance guy out there, right? Especially because we are responsible for just the big structure stuff. That's not stuff that happens every couple months, right? Like it could be years and years before we get a call for, hey, we had that water leak, I forgot about that outdoor underground water pipe, you're right. So that was on us, right? That was a thing, but dude, that happened. I totally forgot about it, right? That was a big to do at the time, but it just took a day, whatever. We got our guy out there, he banged up the concrete, fixed the pipe, and now it's literally out of sight, out of mind. So then for like the management piece, I'm an animal and I don't trust anyone to run it better than I would. But then also to making it easy on yourself, right? By doing that modified gross lease, vetting these tenants really well. I mean, I am literally meeting them. I'm looking them in the eyes. I'm talking to them. I smell their breath, right? And if they're giving me a bad feeling, it's not a guy I want to be in bed with for 3 years, right? Like they are essentially our partners as well, right? Like I want to make sure that, hey, you're not going to be a pain in my butt. And I want to make sure that you have the capability of paying on time. And if you can control those things up front, it makes the management so much easier on the back end by far.
Yeah. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, that's a great building. I hope we can own that thing forever. Hopefully, you guys learned something about what to look out for in these buildings, and we will do another episode very soon with John where we talk about his office building. So stay tuned for that. All right, guys.
Cool.
Appreciate y'all.
See ya.
See ya.